So what's up people and welcome to another Battle Angel Alita / GUNNM video. And this time we're back to Mars Chronicle again. And just like with the previous video with regards to the question regarding what Alita was doing in Venus, this video is also about another question. And I would like to bring it out as a point of discussion because to be honest, I really don't know what the heck is going on, and I would like to get the people who have read Mars Chronicle their input with regards to this question. Now, before I begin, I would like to give my standard spoiler alert because this is a fairly detailed discussion with regards to one of the topics that comes up in Mars Chronicle. If you have not read Mars Chronicle and if you're interested in reading that, then I would suggest that you turn off this video. Of course, those of you who have read Mars Chronicle, of course, I would like you to keep on watching because I would like to get your input. And for those of you who do not mind being spoiled with regards to some of the topics within Mars Chronicle, yes, please join us. Anyway, that is my short spoiler alert, and as always, please watch at your discretion. So for those of you who have read Mars Chronicle, you know that a good majority of the story is about Alita's origin story. And one of the interesting things about that origin story is it has part of it is at least having an Indiana Jones sort of adventure, treasure-seeking sort of storyline, where Alita, Erica, and a few other characters go out to look for the ancient treasures of Mars. And this is where I have a question. Considering the fact that Mars was a colonized planet, which only was colonized, within a few hundred years since the current era, why are there ancient artifacts in Mars? Were these artifacts put or planted by the original inhabitants, the colonized people of Mars? Or were these artifacts brought in by a completely different culture, such as aliens? And of course, one thing we learned throughout the, Battle Angel Alita comic verse is that, of course, there are other life entities that habit the different planets of the solar system, including Venus and Jupiter. And as foreign and alien as they look, one thing that we learn is that these life forms are actually humanoids. And although they have been genetically altered, or cybernetically altered in the case of the Jovians, their basic heritage is that of the humanoid species. And so I would expect Mars to be the same way, and yet when you look at these ancient artifacts, they don't seem like something that you would have expected people of a few hundred years ago who were extremely technologically advanced to colonize Mars to actually create. If anything, they do look like artifacts that Indiana Jones would go after, something that would come from the ancient historical times of Earth. And just like in the movies of Indiana Jones, where he was looking for artifacts such as the Ark of the Covenant, the Lingam Stones of Shiva, or the Holy Grail, in this particular adventure, they also look for artifacts, including the Golden Stock and the Magic Book. And so, there is a very ancient, mysterious artifact hunting that goes on in Mars. But considering the fact that Mars was a colonized planet, exactly where did these artifacts come from? And why are these artifacts kind of familiar to ancient, historical artifacts that you find on Earth? And so if you think about it in that way, you would start thinking, well, was there a visitor from an alien species that came to the solar system? And did they leave some ancient artifacts on Mars? Because why would a modern civilization, put such ancient-looking artifacts in their colonized, planet when they colonize? I mean, the colonization occurs actually several hundred years from what we're living in, right? The 21st century or the 22nd century. And so why would the people that modern put such ancient artifacts in? So that would indicate that maybe it's from an alien species. But if you look at the magic book, it actually has a title. And that title is The Clausewitz on War Volume 2. And what was interesting is when I wanted to look up in the, Battle Angel Alita wiki on this Clausewitz on War Volume 2, I found out that it's actually a real book. There is a book called Clausewitz on War. And so this would indicate that all of these artifacts were Earth-made. And so if that's the case, all of this stuff was basically developed by the original colonists that colonized Mars. But then coming back, why is there this intriguing Indiana Jones sort of mystery? Because again, to get to these things, Alita or Yoko and Erica and the other people had to go through some serious treasure hunting to be able to find these things. And so, why is there such an ancient historical mystery to something that was planted by people who were so modern? Furthermore, as you know, this entire treasure hunting adventure starts with the story, this kind of fairy tale story titled The 9 Kings and the Djinn of Mars. And the story takes place where I guess there were these 9 kings who stole the eternal nostrum from the great Djinn of Mars. And eventually these 9 kings, I guess similar to the Lord of the Rings sort of thing, started warring upon each other for the ownership of the immortal nostrum and destroyed each other. And the Djinn, basically, or a genie, without the immortal nostrum, ended up kind of wandering around as a storm. And I guess that's related to the major storms that occur on Mars. And eventually, the one benevolent king brought this all together and hid the immortal nostrum. I guess as benevolent as he wasn't about to give it back to the Djinn. I don't know why. And then left clues in the golden stock and the magic book. And all this sounds very fairy tale-like. And again, if this was a Indiana Jones type of adventure, I would understand why there is this story that occurs from the legends or the historical, stories that are handed down. But why would that occur in a modern colonized society such as Mars? And exactly who were these 9 kings? I presume those were some empires, the original colony empires that populated Mars. But what the heck was this Djinn? I mean, there's this supernatural being that comes out in this entire story. And why are they putting this entire clue in the story? I mean, if you were a major empire in a modern colonized society, and you created some treasure artifacts that were clues to where the eternal treasure, the immortal nostrum, is, why would you put those clues in a fairy tale that you give to kids? I mean, this doesn't really make sense, right? I mean, this isn't Indiana Jones. This is Battle Angel Alita Mars Chronicle that happens several hundred years in the future. So why does it sound like something that happened several thousand years in the past? And of course, a lot of this happens in the beginning at a location called the Cydonia or the Cydonia domain. And at the beginning, I didn't realize, when I heard about the kingdom of Cydonia or the kingdom of Cydonia, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, I thought that was just an artificial, kingdom, a house, that you have in the one of the great families that colonized Mars. But what I find out is that the Cydonia domain is actually a real thing. And if you recall, there was all that story about the face they found on the surface of Mars, or that when you photographed it, it looked like the face on Mars. Well, that location is actually called Cydonia. So I guess this empire took its name from a location that is actually named in the real world, which is actually, again, very interesting. First of all, it's very interesting that there is a connection between Battle Angel Alita and the real world. But the other thing is with that, the mysterious nature of the face that is on Mars and how it may be associated with alien species, it's interesting that, again, the original colonists put those treasures deep in a location that is shrouded currently by a lot of mystery. Why did they choose that location? Why did they put such a mysterious fairy tale as clues to the location? And how come this has such a treasure hunting feel to it once again, when the people who created this were a bunch of astronauts, that colonized the planet? Basically a bunch of scientists. Typically, they're the last sort of people that you would expect to create such a weird sort of treasure hunting scenario. And of course, the original archaeologists that unearthed some of these clue items, found or discovered a byproduct that came out when they opened some of these ancient containers. And this turned into a devastating, horrifying story. Something that is seriously twisted and horrifying to the level of what you would call a modern day horror equivalent of something like the curse of the ancient mummy, or the curse of whatever treasure that you unearthed in some of these ancient civilizations, whether it's the Mayans or the Egyptians or whatever, right? You often see those old horror movies with regards to what else did they unearth when they unearthed the treasure. And this, of course, happens in Mars Chronicle. And the question again is, why is there such an ancient treasure hunting horror sort of genre that comes out? This time it's not the Indiana Jones sort of movie. It's the Mummy sort of movie that comes out in the story that happens in the future in the cyberpunk sort of universe. Why? Why is this happening? Why are the colonists going out of the way to entrap such a horrifying trap with these clues? If they wanted these clues to be hidden, I would understand if they were guarded by lasers or whatever. Why such a horror movie sort of scenario was created for this? This is just a very interesting thing in that the original colonists may have gone completely bonkers while being out in the middle of Mars, and because of that, they may have created such a horrifying situation. And finally, we know that that ancient fairy tale ends with a young, poor shepherd girl finding the clues and eventually discovering where that immortal nostrum is. And for whatever reason, she lives happily ever after. Now we know in the Mars Chronicle story, they do eventually find the immortal nostrum. And the question is, Erica had a significant impact towards finding that immortal nostrum. So is Erica that young shepherd girl that they're talking about? She's definitely young. She's a girl. And she is poor, although she is not a shepherd. So if it is Erica, does she get to live happily ever after? Because from everything that we see, that's not particularly true. Even now in the Mars Chronicle current story that's happening with the current level Alita, Erica is not particularly living a wonderfully happy life. And we know from the past, Erica lived a horrible, horrifying life. I mean, as horrifying as Alita's life was when she was young, her life looked much, much better compared to Erica. If you recall, Erica was jealous of what happened with Alita because Alita was having such a nicer life than she was. And in fact, as you can see in this background story, as much as Alita is holding hands with Erica, Erica has only one eye. There is a reason why she doesn't have the other eye, and if you find out what it is, what that reason is, you will be extremely horrified at how she lost that eye. And so if this is the shepherd girl, my gosh, there is a twisted meaning of happily ever after. Now, of course, there has been discussions with many of the readers of the Battle Angel Alita Mars Chronicle with regards to the eventual fate of Erica. As we know that she is in somewhat a precarious sort of situation with the story that's going on with her and the Necro Soldiers. And there is always a potential theory that Alita went to Mars to save Erica. So if that's the case, does the story of the shepherd girl living happily ever after indicate that eventually Alita will succeed in saving Erica, and eventually the two of them will get together again and Erica will live happily ever after? And if that's the case, I would be quite happy with that because I do like Erica as a character. She is very much a tragic character. And as psychologically broken as she is and as twisted as she is, I really, really like Erica as a character. And so if there is a possibility for her to actually gain redemption and be able to live happily ever after, then I will look forward to that. Because one thing we do know about the Battle Angel Alita series is that every one of the series is dark. And you get to a point where you're seriously like, why would anybody keep on going on with so many negative things going? But one thing Yukito Kishiro does is always at the end of each one of these stories, there is basically somewhat a happy ending. And so I am hoping that if that happened in the original series and if that happened in Mars Last Order, that a similar happy ending will happen in Mars Chronicle. And considering how much of the backstory revolves around Erica, possibly even more so than Alita, and considering the current story in Mars Chronicle also revolves around Erica, maybe there will be some redemption where Erica will be saved. And if that's the case, once again, I will be very happy with that sort of theme in the ending, and it will be a very appropriate and satisfying ending to the entire Battle Angel Alita comic series. And so yeah, that is a question and interest that I had with regards to this entire, treasure hunting and historical sort of thing. It felt very out of place to this modern day cyberpunk science fiction sort of story. And so I thought that I would like to ask all of you who have also read the Mars Chronicles story how you felt about this entire kind of treasure hunting theme. Did it feel very out of place? Did you feel like you had questions with regards to what the original colonists were thinking to create such a thing? And of course, considering the fact that the immortal Nostrum has the word of immortality in there, is there some connection between that and something like the science of Methuselization? And so it'll be interesting to see how things go, and maybe there is something in the immortal Nostrum that will help save Erica in the end. Anyway, that's about it for this video, and thank you very much for listening. And if you have any comments that you can give with regards to my question, I will very much appreciate it. And I will continue to make more Battle Angel Alita Battle Angel GUNNM videos in the future, and at that time I hope you join us. And until then, happy comic reading, happy treasure hunting, and as always, giant nice day everyone.